let's go back in time and look at Shadow of War, the review from IGN 5 years ago. Because Shadow of War was one of the most heavily monetized predatory games that probably ever launched. Just truly dreadful in all the worst ways possible. It embodied everything that was horrible about 2017 AAA gaming development. And yet people still are like, no, it's actually really good, bro. It's actually really good. I tried it recently, still just as terrible, except now there's like no coherent through line to the end game. So it's just grind for the sake of grind. It used to be grind for the sake of getting you to pay them money to skip the grind, but now it's just grind for the sake of grind, and there really doesn't need to be. It's like actually terrible. Yeah, is this actually going to be like more depressing? We're gonna watch this and you guys are like, can we keep talking about dead dogs? That was more interesting and more upbeat than this.
Like Shadow of Mordor before it, Middle-earth Shadow of War is so much more than just another open-world action game with Batman's combat. Its amazing Nemesis system makes just about every encounter with a named enemy a memorable battle, and the new Fortress Sieges give it legs beyond the campaign through asynchronous multiplayer.
You cannot kill the machine. The steel remains forever.
This story plays just as fast and loose with Lord of the Rings lore as last time. It picks up after the conjoined spirits of ancient elf lord Celebrimbor and Aragorn's stunt double Talion forge a new ring of power, and immediately lose it. Their beef with the Witch King feels drawn out, with lots of clunky derivative dialogue, but there are some strong moments. Flashbacks to the Ringwraith's corruption, battles with the Balrog, and even the founding of Minas Morgul are all standouts, if you can stomach the non-canon version of events. It goes to interesting places, visually at least. Each of Shadow of War's 5 zones looks markedly different, giving it a good variety. There is
I will say, like, the zones were cool. I just really wish we were able to explore, like, the lands between. I get that this was in a weird time, like, it was running on now last-gen hardware, but the way that they designed the overworld felt very, very outdated to me. Like, it felt like a 360 game in the bad way, because it was all these small maps that are supposedly joined together by these big like rocky fields and places that you could run between, but you couldn't do that. You just had these overworlds that you would go to that felt different. And even then the maps were, I don't know, the maps were weirdly, like as you see on the mini map here, they were not very open. They were very tight, and they weren't designed in like a leveled or stacked way. It was just really bad. I just really did not like it.
Lot of running, but Talion's moves make that quick and fun, except when you get stuck on a ledge. On the other hand, all of the locations are functionally identical and inhabited by the same types of enemies and wildlife, and their beauty is sometimes disfigured by
Thank you,
some
Jay.
nasty pop-in that can leave.
JTCU donated $4.99 through Super Chat. So I just finished The Witcher 3 for the 12th time and am clueless on what to do with life.
I know the feeling. That's funny. Yeah, I feel you there. I mean, it's honestly, I think you could go and probably, and I know this sounds insane, you could try something like Assassin's Creed Odyssey and you might actually really enjoy it, because it does have a lot of the same narrative, side questing. That was their direct inspiration. They were basically trying to just do The Witcher 3. So you could try that, and that's going to give you 100 hours. There's a lot there. I mean, it gets a little aggressive and tedious towards the end, but it's pretty good. Beyond that, like other badass open world games that scratch the Witcher itch, I mean, you could go back through Red Dead 2 or Red Dead 1. Those would be good. But I know the feeling, like you play The Witcher 3 and you're like, okay, well, what now? And everything else just kind of falls. Oh, jeez. What? the noise dampening foam fell from on top of me. Huh. Well, I mean, well, there you go. I don't know why it fell, but there we go. Huh. I was like, what on earth just happened? Okay, anyway. It's saying clean me. Yeah, room's too hot and loosen the adhesive. Yeah, see, I'm not lying when I say the room gets toasty. I'm not lying. I'm being honest. I'm being real. Andre, thank you. Just wanted to say thank you for all the content and entertainment for advocating critical thinking at a time when it's sorely lacking. Cheers. Thank you, my friend. And I will continue to do it. I've been pleasantly surprised at, for one, the response to these like skeptical look videos. I feel like it's scratching an itch in the industry that I always felt like was there, like we needed to address it and we needed more critical thought. But for like, there's no nice way of saying this. Most gaming content nowadays is extremely brain dead. Most of it is built on accentuating and doubling down on hype for the sake of easy clicks. And it's about hopping on whatever the popular bandwagon is and just looping forward through that. And so it's disingenuous, it's brain dead, it's anti-intellectual, anti-thought, and it's very toxic, and I hate it with a passion. And so I started doing these like critiques, and people responded really well to those. Then we started doing these critical look videos and skeptical look videos, and those have started doing really well. And I think it's because people really want that out of their gaming coverage, but they've only ever had like the most brain dead takes from the most ridiculous YouTubers. And so it's weirdly special to have somebody come in and be like, no, that's like the leap in logic you're making there is a fallacy and you can't do that. That's irrational. And then, it's just because people are not used to having anything like that in the gaming space. And so we're going to start seeing a lot of it. Like you're going to start to see a lot of the bigger YouTubers ironically jump on this bandwagon now and start to try to be critical and skeptical. But I bet you money this is what's going to happen. People are going to start doing it, but they don't, as we saw with the Podcast Now guy, they don't understand skepticism. They think skepticism is cynicism, so they're going to completely miss the mark, and you're going to see a ton of people making some hilariously awful videos trying to be skeptical of stuff and instead just being cynical pricks. And it's going to be funny, and it's going to give people the impression that to be skeptical, you just have to be cynical and say everything sucks. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really, really interesting. But we'll see. You clipped it? Good. That was so funny. Luke, don't say anything bad about Shadow War because Hogwarts Legacy review code. Yeah. No, I mean, at this point, I'm already braced to not get the Hogwarts Legacy review code because I found out some of the dev team did see my skeptical look video, which I don't think was bad. I think they would agree with all of that. But also, they saw my collector's edition video, which I unabashedly teased the ever-living crap out of them because it's a horrible collector's edition. And even like the most diehard fans agree with that. So I think the odds are slim that I end up getting the review code. But we're trying. I mean, we're trying to get in contact with them and get lined up for it however we can. We'll see. I hope. It'd be great. But Wyatt, good to see you. Right now we're going through Shadow of War, and we're talking about that because that was another Warner Brothers game. And they have a little known game called Hogwarts Legacy set to come out quite soon. So we are going to see that whole thing very soon. But let's see it. Get the review code for Forsaken or Forspoken. I've been trying for Forspoken. I have not heard anything yet, though. That's a similar thing. I've been very outspoken that I think that game looks like ass. And maybe they just have like a horrible demo and the demo just makes the game look bad. Maybe that's what it is. A lot of the people I mentioned earlier on the stream that I went and I found the subreddit dedicated to Forspoken, and most of the people on that subreddit say that the demo actively worked against them. The demo actually made the game look worse than it actually is. That's what they say. And I don't know if that's true. I mean, we're going to see when the game comes out if the game's better than the demo made it out to be. But the fans are not thrilled with the demo. So maybe the game ends up being great and the demo just made it look bad. I don't know. But I've been trying for a review code for that as well. But either way, I think we're going to do like a Luke or I tried Forspoken so you don't have to video. So we'll do that. so you don't have to spend your money. Early thoughts on Avowed? I'm very interested. Obsidian's been doing really, really good stuff recently, but it's weird that we haven't heard of anything since the announcement. Forsaken's a better name. Oh, dude, for real. Every time I type it into Google to like look up news for it or something, they think it's a typo. Can we do Luke tours where Luke goes around studios and asks them why you do that? Like the Hogwarts Legacy collector's rubbish. That actually would be very funny. Why you do this? Why did you do this? This was stupid. Why would you do this to everybody? It's honestly critical thinking. No one improves if the feedback is not honest. That's kind of my thought. Like I really don't understand why people think that pretending as though games don't have problems helps anything. Like the whole thing with Death Stranding, I'm like, Death Stranding 2 is coming. I want that game to be good. So I'm going to hold their feet to the fire and I'm going to describe all the ways that Death Stranding 1 sucked while also doubling down on the things I think that worked. And hopefully they learn from it and move forward. Otherwise, you just get Death Stranding 2 and it's all the worst parts of Death Stranding 1 exacerbated and made way, way worse, which is what we're going to get. That's what it's going to end up being. Because none of Kojima's fans actually spoke out and said, hey, this doesn't work. All of them just sucked up to him and call him like a triumph and a genius and a breath of fresh air in an industry that's starved of creativity. It's like, no, it's just nonsense, like we said before. Is this breathtaking? Is this intelligent? Is this profound? Or is it just stupid? And most of the time with him, it's just freaking stupid. Anyway.
Terrain textures looking like something out of Minecraft.
It still has popping issues. I tried it recently.
The main story is a sideshow to the one created by each encounter with hundreds of randomly generated Uruk captains. It's great to constantly run into colorful characters like these guys.
I sing this song with all my breath. Take heed, for this interlude ends with your death.
Each has their own random combination of a huge selection of strengths to counter and weaknesses to exploit. They're full of surprises and personality, so much so that I'm still seeing new faces, voices, and even armor elements after 50 hours. It's almost a shame to lop off their heads and limbs with spectacularly animated, slow-motion finishing moves. There are also meat pinatas full of potentially game-changing loot. That makes it an interesting trade-off between killing an Uruk captain instead of brainwashing him and recruiting him into your army. Plus, each piece of high-end loot comes with a challenge to unlock its more powerful traits. So there's always something new to do as you fight, and there's always another reward. Some of those challenges are built around the absurdly forgiving stealth, but most are active and interesting. Just like in Shadow of Mordor, individual Uruks are so non-threatening that they're basically health pickups. But when dozens of them flood the screen at once, they're a force to be reckoned with. When a captain enters the fray, it's like a scene from a movie where two opposing heroes spot each other across the battlefield and cut a swath through their armies to fight. It is easy to get overwhelmed, even when Talion is leveled up with ridiculously powerful abilities. Knowing when to back off and heal up is key. But even then, Shadow of War is much better at keeping the pressure on than Shadow of Mordor, so its fights never get quite as easy toward the end. Considering it's actually impactful and sort of fun to die because of the way the enemy Uruks rank up, that's a very good thing. It's true that
I will say that is the really cool thing about the Nemesis system, is that they actually made death something players will casually and occasionally pursue and choose to like enact, because it allows these orcs to level up, which makes them more interesting, gives them better gear, better loot. And so players will willingly die, which is something that normally like a game does not want you to do. A game doesn't want you to die because that means something went wrong. But in this case, sometimes it means something's going right, because it's so fun to watch how things change after that, that players are willing to do it, even though it's I mean, they're dying, you know? It's really interesting.
You could count the enemy types that didn't appear in Shadow of Mordor on one hand, but they do have a major impact. The hulking Ulags make quite an impression, and when a drake flies overhead, its fire breath changes things up considerably. The biggest new features of Shadow of War are its fortresses, which you can conquer with a large-scale invasion force of brainwashed Uruks. The process of breaching the walls and holding capture points tends to be pretty easy. You've got a whole army backing you up, led by your fiercest captains and upgraded with everything from mounted cavalry to siege artillery. But the battle at the end with a local overlord and his henchmen is no joke. Once you've taken a fortress, you get to appoint your own forces to defend it against invasions, both as part of the story and the asynchronous multiplayer where other players can basically download a copy of your Uruks to fight. This means Uruks are essentially loot themselves, with epic and legendary captains presenting a huge potential. Leveling them up by sending them out on assassination missions or AI versus AI pit fights gives them an almost Pokemon-like feeling. But there's not enough control over your armies in either fortress invasions or defenses to make them feel really strategic. A quick word about the controversial microtransactions. Ignore them completely. They're just a way to get loot that isn't killing Uruks, which is the best thing about Shadow of War, so you'd basically be paying to have less fun. Similar to the way Batman Arkham City built on the foundation of Arkham Asylum, Middle-earth Shadow of War is bigger and more ambitious in scope than Shadow of Mordor, with great results. The way it expands on the excellent Nemesis system with far greater variety in fortress sieges makes even better use of the standout generated characters, and its battles with
Gave it a 9. That's insane. They just kind of blow past it. But the reason why this is such an important thing to touch on is the same reason why we talk about like Ubisoft and their XP boosters. Because when a game developer puts something like this into the game, what happens is that they tend to balance the game around it. And the reason that's a problem is because when you balance the game around these types of microtransactions, you're balancing the game off of paying to win. And so when you don't pay to win, everything else kind of falls apart and the game ends up extremely bloated and miserable. So with Shadow of War, the grind to reach the true ending was horrible. It was like insane. Does anyone remember how many hours it was to actually grind to the true ending of it? Yeah, see my 3-year-old video on Shadow of Mordor grind. I thought it was way more than 20, 30 hours. Yeah, whenever a game has an unlimited gem and money farming spot, that's concerning to me. Like, I don't think games should have farming spots. It was one of my problems with Elden Ring too, is that players felt the need to grind. 5 years. Okay, this will explain it. 5 years ago.
I thought it would be all too easy to just waltz in here and climb this fort. And it is!
Hello, Johnny from Eurogamer here with another reveal about Shadow of War, this time concerning the endgame. As you almost certainly know by now, your goal in Shadow of War is to take over Mordor, conquering fortresses and making them your own in order to combat the forces of the Dark Lord Sauron. But what happens when you've done that? What happens when the final mission is over and all the forces of Mordor are under your heel? Well, Sauron tries to take it back, of course. There's a previously unannounced endgame mode called the Shadow Wars, which you're looking at right now. In the Shadow Wars, Sauron's forces mount assaults against your fortresses to try and take them back, and it's your job to defend them. Here you can see Talion's army preparing to defend the region of Saragost.
Swine! That fort doesn't belong to you! But this eye gouger has your name all over it!
In gameplay terms, it basically means getting to explore the flip side of the coin when it comes to fortress assaults, setting up your army, defending your capture points, and trying to kill the waves of advancing enemies, enemy war chiefs and all, before the fortress falls.
Whoa! They're quivering in fear, boys! And soon this fort will be ours!
It's a pretty frenetic assault. While the Dark Lord's forces are separated out into waves, they won't wait patiently for you to fend off one wave before starting the next one. They just pile in, meaning you can be thoroughly overrun if you're not careful. If you successfully defend the fortress, congratulations, it's yours to keep and you can carry on customizing and upgrading it as normal. If you fail, however, let's just say for the sake of argument you get killed in a surprisingly long and brutal sequence involving a crossbow, things get rather interesting.
I'm going to miss splattering your blood all over the place. But now that I'm a war chief, I'm going to make this place run red with the stuff.
For one thing, the fortress and region are both lost. The orc that killed you, in this case Zuka Weapon Master, becomes the overlord of the fortress. He also earns himself a shiny new title out of the bargain, becoming Zuka the Conqueror. Obviously, having this fortress back under the control of the Dark Lord won't do, so you'll need to retake it and claim Zuka's head in order to progress. More pressingly, however, the overlord of the fortress you just lost has been captured by the enemy, and you'll need to mount a rescue mission in order to get him back.
So it's really interesting, right? Like, doesn't sound terrible. You know, you're going to defend your fortresses, they're going to launch counterattacks, then you'll go and take your captains back and try to rescue them, and then you overthrow that guy, and that creates like this dueling thing. It's a cool idea. The problem was that in order to see the true ending of the game, you needed to do this, and it would take, like, I remember it being anywhere from 40 to 100 hours. And that was to max level your, like, all of your orcs, your top level legendary orcs. And that's insane. Whereas you could just buy them, you know, to properly defend the high level stuff. And you had to survive like 7 waves of defensive attacks. Like you had to defend 7 times or something like that. And it was just crazy, intense. So much stuff involved with it. But a lot of people got to the end of it and just walked away. Oh yeah, this is the Maddie era. Maddie has had different, like, what would you call them? It's like different arcs, story arcs, but they're all related to his production value. And it's always really funny because he'll have like a 6-month period where his camera white balance is screwed up, so he looks super orange in all of his videos. And then there'll be another 6-month period where like it's better, it's in focus and the white balance is proper, but then like the lights are slightly off. It's thoroughly entertaining. I love the guy to death, but it's very funny. Oh god, are we gonna do this? I think we have to, because Yong's the only person with a video popping up.
I knew it, I fucking knew it. Last time we talked about
I'm
Shadow
so sorry.
of War, we discussed an interview that design director Bob Roberts did with website Eurogamer. In the interview, when asked about concerns regarding game balance and progression due to the implementation of loot boxes and microtransactions, Bob claimed that the game has been balanced so that the game could be enjoyed without them. He said, "We're working our tails off to make this massive game, and as a designer, I focus on balancing it. We do a ton of playtesting to make sure it is tuned to a setting where people can enjoy it. We kept all of the loot boxes and the economy of real-world money turned off in playtesting, so we know we're balancing around an experience which is rewarding without any of that stuff. Hopefully, when it is out there and people are able to talk about their experiences, then the balancing question will be answered, hopefully by people you trust to play through it and see that." Sounds reassuring at a glance, but to me, these words rang hollow from the moment I heard them, because we have been there, done that. Time and again, developers and publishers have claimed the exact same thing, only for the final microtransactions and loot box infested product to not live up to those words. And unfortunately, as it turns out, Shadow of War is no different. The following information comes from various reviews that have been making waves across the internet. For the most part, the game has been fairly well received by critics, praised for an excellent combat system, an expanded open world, the introduction of fortress sieges, and improvements to the unique Nemesis system that the series is best known for. Most reviews also agree that for the most part, microtransactions and loot boxes can be ignored without too many adverse effects, as the game does grant you weapons, armor, and orc followers aplenty. That's not to say that they aren't distracting. As website Eurogamer described it in their review, the fact these chests aren't necessary, however, does little to diminish the awareness that they're very much a part of the game, especially when you're reminded of the market's existence by way of an announcement carousel every time you pause the game. One point of contention, however, is the main campaign story. Numerous critics have said in their reviews that the story is just not very good.
Yeah, the story is pretty nonsensical. I find it painfully uninteresting. And maybe that's just me, but I really, if you ask me what it's about, I mean, Sauron's attacking forts and has forts, and so you fight them for the forts, and then you take over. It's like the generic, We have to reclaim these lands to further our fight against the bad guy, and like that's it. That's all there is.
With outlets like GameSpot calling it mediocre and Eurogamer going as far as calling it dreadful. Even more unfortunate is how Shadow of War handles its true ending. The game apparently has a regular ending and then a hidden true ending that you can only unlock by meeting certain conditions. A NeoGAF user going by the name of Chairman Chuck did a fantastic job of compiling some quotes from reviews detailing exactly what unlocking the true ending entails. Let's begin by reading this excerpt from website Polygon, which scored the game a 7.5 out of 10. Here's what they said. Shadow Wars, the name of the game's fourth act, is spoiled by two major issues. First, it's not just post-game content. While the main plot of Shadow of War wraps up in relatively tidy fashion before Act 4 begins, Monolith has confirmed that there is a true ending hidden behind Shadow Wars. I love the idea of offering dozens of hours of grindy yet fun content for players who really adore this game to sink their teeth into. But that works better as an option rather than a looming obligation for completionists. Having the game's real finale locked away behind those dozens of hours.
Finale.
Hours that, while fun, are devoid of story missions, side quests, cutscenes, or other distractions that help mix up the pace.
Young's ads and new videos are kind of grating. I didn't know he did ads. I haven't watched a new Young video in, I'm not joking, probably like 2 years. I don't think. Because I can't think of any time I've ever seen him do an ad read. I mean, I'm fine with him getting that check, getting that fat stack. More power to him. I'd say with his numbers, he should be, making some good money doing it. But it's, at least he left the door open. I always feel bad for Carrick from ACG because he made his catchphrase giving you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. And so right there, he can never do a sponsorship without it feeling like he's going back on what he said. Even though sponsorships are fine. Who cares? If it's a sponsored review, sponsored by the publisher, yeah, that's a problem. But I've never heard of that, where they ask you to review it and they're paying you to do it. I've seen, we'll pay you to play our game. We had that for Naraka Blade Point. They said, hey, can we pay you to play the game, say whatever you think, but just play it? I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. I don't care. I'll play it. I've actually played it before and actually kind of like it. So, yeah, let's do it. But I guess, some people are more opposed to it than others, I suppose. Because it's apparently a controversy. Digital Foundry does sponsored reviews? Oh, well, there you go.
A disappointment. When you run out of in-game money, you have two choices. Make a huge time investment by hunting down orcs
really
in
have
your
this
game
many
world
left?
and earning chests via vendetta missions, or spend some real money to get the more powerful orcs you need now. Does the game ever force you to spend money? No. I'm sure you can get to the end of Shadow Wars without spending a dime, as long as you're patient and persistent. But locking progress through this mode, and again toward the game's true ending, behind either spending more money or doing tons of tedious busy work, feels at least greedy, if not predatory. Here's another excerpt from GameSpot speaking to that effect, stating, in the game's actual final act, you cycle through the 4 fortresses you explored previously for a total of 20 more defending siege battles. If you haven't upgraded the orcs you met early in the game, and up until this point there was no reason to, you have to replace and upgrade your entire retinue of orcs to match this more powerful invading force. The enemies you face level up with each encounter, so you're also forced into upgrading each castle over and over again, either by building up your current orc army or finding new fighters and replacing the old. This Sisyphean quest has no corresponding significant characters to keep you company or explain why it's important to tackle the defense missions in the order you do. It's not even clear exactly why you want to do them at all. More than once I felt like giving up on this quest, thinking I'd stumbled onto some optional side content that was clearly only made for obsessed completionists, but enduring on, I found that finishing every stage unlocks the final cutscene and credits. It did not feel worth it. The next excerpt is from Games Radar explaining some type of workaround that allows you to influence the rarity of the orc followers that spawn.
Like, if you have to get to this level just to finish the game, it kind of sucks. Like, yeah, you reach the end of the story, and a lot of people will be like, yeah, that's fine. Because this is like the one saving grace of Shadow of War is that when it launched, the issues were pretty much mostly relegated to the end game, like to get the true ending. But most people, I think, got through the 20-hour main story and then probably were done. I don't think many people pushed... Like, the majority of people would have pushed on after that. Because I remember I like when I went back and I forced myself to finish Shadow of War, I reached the story ending and I was like, that was thoroughly underwhelming. Like, that was hilariously bad. And then I realized, oh, now we're in the final phase of grind where we have to go through these waves of fighting orcs trying to overthrow these things. And it just was kind of tedious because it is like you'll recruit orcs and then you have to send them off on assassination missions. And then those guys go off and they, you know, whatever, they try to assassinate somebody to level up or do this or that. And it's just not very fun. I'm going to swap lenses so you can see the Lego set a little closer. What am I building? Lego Titanic. We are on our way. We're almost halfway done with it. I think actually we're halfway done. I think now we're leading into the second third. Or yeah, the second... closing out the second third, maybe moving into the third quarter or the third fifth, if that is helpful at all. You're getting your own NPC. No, nothing that exciting. That would be really funny if that's what they ended up doing and just didn't tell me. But yeah, that would be funny. Look, I need the release date. I cannot tell you anything.
But I use the word workaround loosely because the process is still a pain in the ass.
I'm not blowing
I won't
this.
read the whole thing, but it involves gaming the Nemesis system by purposely allowing an orc to kill you and rise through the ranks while having to get lucky with the system's random number generator. So yeah, still not ideal. Moving on, we have a quote from Waypoint, which just quotes Polygon's review, so let's skip that. Last but not least, the NeoGAF user also gathered a quote from Eurogamer Review's comment section. Here's what the user said. A word of warning about microtransactions. If you want to complete the endgame and see the true ending, be prepared to buy the XP boost from the store while you're playing the campaign or face a 40 to 50 hour grind.
40-50.
I finished the story in about 15 hours and agreed that it's awful and have been grinding for 8 hours a day for the past 4 days just to level up enough to finish the Shadow of War endgame content. And
That's something I just don't get. Like, some players are fine with 8 hour a day grinding for a game that they don't like. I don't understand that. I seriously don't get it. If you hate it, put it down. You know, it's not even like, oh, this is the one game I get to play a year. Like, these are pretty hardcore gamers. If they can justify spending 8 hours in a day playing it. You know, it's not like they're spacing it out. But he's saying he doesn't like the game and he's playing it for 8 hours a day. It's one thing if you're a YouTuber making a video like on how terrible it is. I get that. But with this, I really don't understand this attitude. I don't get it.
It is indescribably tedious. There it is, folks. Don't mind that the game is basically charging for single-player cheats and shortcuts, which used to be free back in the day. Don't mind that these loot boxes might affect the balance of ranked online multiplayer. And don't mind that loot boxes will have people gambling for their rewards rather than having them pick out what they want. The game's true ending is also affected by this bullshit as well. From what these people are saying, it looks like Shadow of War's post-game has been purposely paced to be a grind so that players will be tempted to purchase loot boxes via microtransactions to hasten the painstaking process of unlocking the game's true ending. It's pay or grind. So yeah, for those who had any doubts that microtransactions and loot boxes would have no influence on the game balance and progression whatsoever, there it is, clear as day. It's yet another example of a purposely diluted, overstretched experience as a result of greedy business practices. It's a damn shame really, because according to the reviews, Shadow of War is an otherwise great game that improves upon the original in almost every way. If you can get past the microtransactions, there is actually a great game in there, but it's tainted by the familiar scent of predatory publishers with intentions of exploiting players' frustrations and impatience to leech and milk money. I know some will inevitably argue that at least it's mostly optional and can mostly be ignored until you have to unlock the true ending, but excusing these practices, no matter how minor they may seem, is still an endorsement of them. If we keep giving publishers a pass, it'll just encourage them to keep pushing the boundaries of what they can get away with a little further each time. And before we know it, shit like this will become standard. You'll look back and wonder, how the hell did we get here? How is this normal now? We've already seen these kinds of steady pushes happen from Destiny 1 to Destiny 2 with shaders, from NBA 2K17 to NBA 2K18 with VC or virtual currency, from Forza Motorsport 6 to Forza Motorsport 7 with prize crates, and now from Shadow of Mordor to Shadow of War with loot chests.
I really think what it is, like, you've noticed loot boxes are not really a mainstay nowadays in terms of monetization of games, and I do find that interesting because they were all the talk. It was all over the place in 2017. Pretty much any major new AAA release had loot boxes. I mean, let's be real, they pretty much all had it. And at some point, these executives realized that it just wasn't worth the trouble, so they would find different ways to do it. And interestingly, they usually chose to go the route of like just offering you straight up the pack and letting you buy it. Like in Call of Duty now, people will pay $20 for the skin on one gun and then like a matching camo or something. And they'll pay, again, $20 for that when they bought the game for just 3 times that, or they like got the game for free because they play it on multiplayer. Like, it's insane to me. He took my thing.